Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We are now moving on to the final game from last night, where we saw the Oklahoma City Thunder pull off, you can call it a comeback, I suppose, against the New Orleans Pelicans last night, where the Pelicans had a 5-point lead late in this game, but their execution down the stretch just was not good enough. Josh Giddey actually was sort of the unsung hero for the Thunder, where he was making some big plays. He knocked down a handful of threes, including the go-ahead in that fourth quarter. He had a big steal as I believe it was Herb Jones driving, and sort of the nifty little footwork where he was out of bounds. He saw the ball coming towards him. He sort of hopped back inbounds, did a little Mike Jackson thriller move where he was up on his toes, and then got the pass up court that ended up leading to a three on the other end, I believe, for the Thunder in that situation. But this was a series where felt like the Pelicans had at least a puncher's chance to make this something. Obviously, they didn't have Zion Williamson, which made them, borderline impossible to actually pick. But Game 1 was a close one, and it seemed like they had, again, at least a chance to potentially make this a game. It took some late-game Shai Gilgeous-Alexander heroics in that Game 1 to end up pulling away that win. They won 94-92 there. And like that game was low scoring, this game was as well. And those sort of rock fights felt like the types of games where the Pelicans could take advantage of, is throwing the Thunder, that is, off of their game offensively and take advantage from there. But as we saw throughout this series, there was just not enough shot makers and not a real offense to take place in this type of a situation. And just a really brutal series for Brandon Ingram as a whole, where I feel like there's a good chance we could potentially see Brandon Ingram maybe on the move this offseason. I'm not saying where to yet, but for the Pelicans, it feels like they're sort of circling in on being legitimately competitive in this Western Conference, assuming that Zion Williamson is fully healthy. I feel like last offseason there was a little bit of a debate of who would you rather build around between Brandon Ingram and Zion. I like Brandon Ingram, and maybe it's unfair to, look at this particular series because he missed much of the end of the regular season with an injury. Then he comes back and just never really looked like he was 100%. And added to the fact that then he comes into this Oklahoma City series and he has to go up against what should be All-NBA defender Lou Dort, who was absolutely phenomenal for the Thunder in this series. Held Brandon Ingram to just 14.3 points per game on under 25% shooting splits. He was just really nowhere to be found in this game. And in this series as a whole, it's not like CJ McCollum was great necessarily either, but he at least put together a solid game last night, and they just needed a second go-to scorer, and Brandon Ingram was not that, unfortunately. So the Pelicans end up falling in this one, 97-89. Again, it felt like a game that, I wouldn't even say necessarily it was a pride moment for them, because without Zion, they are clearly not the same team, and it just, I feel like they were much less talented than this Oklahoma City Thunder team, who we're going to be getting into here, is way more postseason ready than a lot of people considered. I myself said that. Now, I had them beating the Pelicans. I just worry about the Thunder when it comes to playing either of the top two teams in the West, in my eyes, in the Nuggets and Timberwolves, in terms of being able to manage size. Jonas Valanciunas wasn't necessarily... Jonas Valanciunas is a good pro, just as a whole. He did a really good job on the glass in this series, backed down Chet a handful of times and got his, but ultimately it's just not efficient offense necessarily, and Chet is a very solid defender that he's going to get his in a lot of these instances. Anytime these other players are trying to... I feel like he's especially great at defending the rim, sort of as that help side defender, and sort of coming in from the backside and making plays like that. But I think that it's going to be a much different story when they have to face a Karl Anthony Towns or a Nikola Jokic on the other side of the bracket in the Western Conference. But anyways, for the Thunder, I thought this was very encouraging to see. Now, we sort of, at least I personally don't want to speak for everybody, I said that this is probably the year before the year for them, where they're now they've arrived. They haven't necessarily had their hearts broken to some degree when it comes to postseason play, which seems like a lot of times that needs to happen in order for a team to take that next step. And that being said, if the heartbreak's going to come a little bit later, you're going to take all of the success you can possibly get. And I think there's going to be a great chance that they make the conference finals. As things currently stand, they're going to face the winner of the Mavericks-Clippers series. That series is knotted up at 2-2. We're not going to get the official result of that possibly for a handful of days now. But I do think they're going to have a very good chance. Again, I cannot understate how phenomenal Lou Dort was from a defensive perspective. And this Thunder team as a whole, I just think they play such a beautiful brand of basketball where, they have their go-to guys that can get them buckets. It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams was also terrific in this game. 24 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 9 of 17 from the field. His downhill scoring is just so impressive on these drives. But for the Thunder, generally, everybody can shoot for them. They have so much spacing, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the NBA. Everybody is switchable from a defensive perspective, including their, top 2 offensive scorers. They're both two-way guys. And then you have other players come off the bench where different specialists. I think that Cason Wallace has had an unbelievable rookie season. Hasn't necessarily been talked about like that, but some of the defensive possessions he has had in this early going for OKC, obviously stopping CJ McCollum on the final possession of Game 1. There was an instance later in this game where he stripped Brandon Ingram just straight up. Ingram thought he had a matchup. Finally, I'm off of Lou Dort out of the torture chamber, and Cason Wallace just stripped down on him. Ball ended up with Isaiah Joe, who ran the court and got 2 on the other side. But Isaiah Joe, another player, really impressive off of the bench. Aaron Wiggins is another one that I really like. He struggled a little bit from an efficiency standpoint last night. But the Thunder are, they're a deep team. Now, in terms of depth, the big man position is still something that I feel like is going to be a little bit of a wake-up call for them this postseason. I don't think they're going to be able to deal with the size. Even when you look at, the way that we've seen the first round play out a little bit at times, Ivica Zubac, the way that he dominated the offensive glass, especially in Game 1, he can be an underrated, skilled big man. You have a combination of guys in Dallas from Derek Lively and with Daniel Gafford that can be sort of paint beasts as well. Now, I'm not saying that Chet can't hold his own in these matchups because Chet is, again, a very promising young center. I'm just saying that it's not going to be easy for him either in the post, and that's just sort of the warm-up for one of the 2 post scorers that they would be getting in the Western Conference Finals that are much more, hands-on guys from an offensive creation standpoint than Chet and the Thunder are going to see in Game 2, in Series 2, in Round 2 is what I'm trying to say. But, I feel like for the Thunder here, you can't help but feel good for them. There are questions in terms of which guys are going to be the future building blocks. They have a lot of these players that are going to be eligible for contract extensions at the same time. Now, the way that this all works out, and especially under this new CBA, the fact that they have all this draft capital in the near future, they could easily go over that second luxury tax, and they wouldn't necessarily have to make all too many other transactions other than just keep swinging. They've been a great drafting team in recent years. Just continue to, take your swings in the draft. You already have the core nucleus of what you need. But it is an interesting conversation when you know that you're going to be playing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You're going to be paying the Santa Clara Jalen Williams. Chet Holmgren is a lock to be making money for you. Where do you go from there? Because Josh Giddey, he was very good from a three-point perspective last night, again, especially in the fourth quarter. And I do want to see what his catch-and-shoot numbers are on the season as a whole. Giddey is not scared to shoot. And I know that that's obviously not his strong suit, and it feels like a lot of teams are fully willing to sort of put up with Josh Giddey trying to take those types of looks. But at the same time, as long as you're actually shooting those looks and you can start hitting some maybe, and at least, keep the opposing defense honest, it's a weapon to have. And again, I'm not sure. I'm looking this up here on the fly, so his catch and shoot numbers could be bad, and it would sort of put an end to my point in this situation. But again, I just feel like generally, Giddey is somebody who his importance seemed like it sort of fell off. Obviously, he had the off the court issues that really sort of dampened his public reputation, along with the fact that he just hasn't been quite as good during this season now that he has taken a little bit more of a back seat from an offensive creation standpoint. But like I said, his numbers are okay from a three-point shooting percentage. He's 34.4% on catch and shoot three-pointers, which you'd like to see be better, but it's at least an improvement for where it's been in past seasons. He is shooting a career high 33.7% from the field, from three, that is. So I feel like he's the odd man out. I feel like he would probably be the one that Oklahoma City would part with first. But, I just think that the roster construction of the Thunder here is very interesting, and I'm curious what direction they are going to choose to go moving forward here, because I just named the three you absolutely have to pay is SGA, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren. I would try and keep Lou Dort around as long as possible because he adds, this Oklahoma City Thunder team, as much as it does feel like they are a little bit susceptible in the paint, they're still fourth in the league during the regular season, at least, in defensive rating. And the way that they played this series, and granted, the Pelicans are sort of hindered from a health perspective because of the Zion situation, but the Pelicans didn't score over 50 points in a single half all series. So it's obviously 4 games, 8 halves. That is pretty unheard of in the NBA in 2024. And again, it's because of that switchability. It's because of the versatility. It's because of the IQ. I think that Mark Daigneault is also a tremendous coach from a scheming standpoint. So, I don't know. Thunder are just a very fun team here. And it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the postseason goes for them. Now, again, Pelicans, I'm sure we'll talk more about them in the offseason. I feel like they are going to be due for, I wouldn't necessarily say a panic move, but trying to shake things up, because it does feel like I believe in the foundation that's there. I'm the number one Herb Jones fan in the world, I think, but they have some guys that I feel like are very promising. I feel like there's the likes of a Trey Murphy, who probably can do more from an offensive perspective if he's given a bigger role, but he just plays so similar to Brandon Ingram, where if you go back to the play-in tournament, that's why I sort of understood why, along with the fact that Ingram was still sort of coming back from that injury, that during the fourth quarter run where the Pelicans, I still feel like, would have won that game if it weren't for Zion getting injured, they were doing so with Brandon Ingram on the bench and Trey Murphy sort of playing his spot on the court. So let me know what you feel about the futures of these two teams. I feel like they both have bright ones ahead. I think the Pelicans have a little bit of tweaking that they need to do before they have fully arrived. But that is all we have time for on this segment. We are going to be taking our final break of the show, and when we come back, I want to do a little exercise talking about the legacy of Kevin Durant, who has been facing a lot of scrutiny in these past couple days because of the Suns getting swept. So I have some thoughts on that. Stick with us, and we will be right back.